I'm starting a new project. Hi! So, if you don't know me, my name is Olivia. I make neon with my dad and my brother in Kansas City. And you might be wondering what's behind me here. Maybe why I'm sitting in front of two kind of casket looking wooden boxes. These are actually harp cases. So, the story starts with a garage sale. My husband and I were driving down the road heading to my sister's house when we saw in a driveway, at first glance, what I thought was a giant casket, like a weird shaped casket. And I was intrigued. We pulled over, we took a look at it. Turns out it was a harp case with no harp inside. We talked to the person who was selling it. He had plans to turn it into a coffee table, chop it up, turn it into a coffee table. Well, now he's moving, and he's not going to move with a giant harp case across the country. I, at that point, knew that I needed it. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I had no plan, but something was telling me to buy this harp case. Probably 2 years ago at this point, where this harp case finally came to the studio. Again, I had no plans for this thing. I just liked it. So you're probably wondering at this point, so that's how you came into possession of one harp case, but you're sitting in front of two harp cases. Ooh. So one day, one of our awesome clients notices this harp case collecting dust in the corner. He says, "What is that?" I say, "It's a harp case." He says, "Can I have it?" I say, "No, I'm going to do something with it." He says, "Can I have it if you put neon in it?" And I say, "Okay." Then he says, "I actually bought another harp case, so now I want you to do something with two harp cases." So now I'm going to do something with two harp cases. And that's where we're at today. I have two harp cases. I know I'm going to put neon in them. And I thought it might be fun to document the process a little bit. I think there is a common and probably valid perception that artists go into a project with confidence, knowing exactly what their concept is. And I thought I could show what my process is, which is maybe a little bit more freeform. Ultimately, I want to have fun with this and take you along for the ride. Okay, scene change. I felt like I needed to be doing something with my hands while I talk. So I'm gonna block out part of this unit that says POW. It'll be really cute, trust me. Okay, so probably the first obvious question about this harp case project is, are harps significant to me anyway? What's my connection to the harp? Which is, to answer that, I have no connection to the harp as an instrument. I've never played it. I don't know really anything about it. I just thought it was a cool looking piece of furniture. And now I find myself in possession of two of them. But as I have started to think about these pieces and what I want to do with them, I remembered that there's an album I fell in love with back in like 2017, 2018, that is very harp centric. That album is called Afro Harping by Dorothy Ashby. And back in a different lifetime, when I was doing a lot of writing and editing in a different career, I was always on the hunt for really good instrumental music that I could enjoy while also focusing on the writing and editing that I was doing at the time. So I don't remember exactly how, but this album, Afro Harping, came into my life. I think I was just doing a lot of exploring of music on YouTube, and it popped up one day. Well, it became part of my regular rotation really quickly. So as I was thinking about this, I was thinking, well, I love this album. It's one of my favorites. I turn it on basically anytime I just want good vibes, easy to listen to, and like technically sounds really beautiful. So I thought, okay, I'll start there. I guess I do have a favorite harpist, which is a weird thing to say. Anyway, so I start to learn more about Dorothy Ashby. And what I learned is that she was a bit of an unsung hero of her time. She learned the harp at a young age in her school that had a really excellent music program. And she was in a class of, I want to say maybe like 15 other girls who were also learning the harp, but they only had a handful of harps among them to practice. So she would practice every chance she got, but she had to share with these other students. Well, her dad was an accomplished jazz musician. So she grew up around a lot of really talented jazz musicians who would get together, have jam sessions, and she really understood that genre and had that jazz mindset. I'm talking about it as if I'm a jazz musician. I'm not a jazz musician. But reading about how she would talk about growing up in that environment, she started jamming with her father's friends, and she kind of learned how to incorporate harp into the jazz genre, which up to that point was unheard of. The harp was kind of a novelty instrument, typically portrayed in classical music, more orchestral settings, but she pioneered its use in jazz. So her first album was, I believe, harp, bass, flute, and drums. So little 4-part ensemble. And it took a lot of work from Dorothy and her bandmates and her family to be seen and be recognized in the music scene and to even book gigs, because who wants to listen to jazz with an instrument that's not a jazz instrument? It was just unheard of at the time. And so she talked about, in some interviews I read, creating her own opportunities, creating events, creating get-togethers where she could build her portfolio, build her repertoire with this instrument. So all that to be said, she had a very successful career as a musician. She pioneered harp. She also pioneered another instrument called the koto, which is a Japanese instrument, and she incorporated that into some later work. And she became a session musician for a ton of different musicians. She was a session musician for basically any popular musician at the time. She would go in and play harp for any of their songs that needed it. So Stevie Wonder, Bill Withers, the list is much longer than just those two. So she was successful in her time, but not necessarily recognized for the significance that her legacy plays in the jazz genre. I have these harp cases that are empty, by the way. There's no harps inside. And I want to recognize Dorothy Ashby. I don't know necessarily what that looks like yet, but to know that she was a black woman playing an essentially unheard of instrument in the jazz genre. I just think that's incredible, and that just takes so much resiliency and creativity and technical knowledge. And she just did it. And even though she had no point of reference, she had no predecessors to illustrate what that would even look like as a career, she did it. And I find that really inspirational. So I think that's all my thoughts. Follow along if you want. And let's see where this goes. Okay, bye.